Hello, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am currently bringing you this video from heaven. Uh, A Gentle Creature is a short story written by Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's a tragic story. It's not a story about love, it's a story about a guy who wants love, but who tries to find it in a very bad way and ends up killing someone because of it. It's a story about the irrationality of the ego. It's a story about cowardice and mental abuse. So Dostoevsky chose to talk about these themes by placing them in this abusive relationship. The names aren't important to Dostoevsky. The main character is never referred to by name, and neither is his wife. The whole story is written in first person, and it's a frantic, panicked, conversational manner. The main character, spills out all of his thoughts as he's recalling this vivid memory. Speaking about his wife, this whole relationship is what the story is about. So the main character is a pawnbroker who, by trade, is not a noble, which is not a noble trade. Forgive me. In Russia at that time, pawnbrokers were seen as conniving, scheming men who took advantage of others in Russian society. They were kind of the lowest of the low. Um, Also, the main character is a coward, but Dostoevsky takes time in developing that. In the first few chapters of the story, what becomes most apparent is the character's egoism. He's very aware of his place in society and how society perceives him and his occupation. As a result, he chooses to purposefully be honest with everyone who comes into his shop, as if that's going to change the way society sees him. Of course, it won't. He's a pawnbroker. But he takes pride in his honesty. His honesty is a sick sort of psychological revenge that he takes out on society to boost his own ego and reinforce in his head that he is the noblest of men. But the irony of the story is that he's constantly in a place of dishonor. His job means society hates him. He was discharged from the army because of cowardice, and now this problem of a wife appears in his life, and she also hates him and dishonors him. She sees him as a coward. Really, she sees him for who he is, even though he provides for her, and when she gets sick, spends a lot of money to make her well again. So why is he constantly in a place of dishonor, and what does his wife have to do with it? So his wife is a girl who comes to his shop. He takes a liking to her, although it should be noted that he humiliates her on several occasions prior to his fancy. So he finds out that she's about to be married to this abusive shop owner. So he thinks that he can take advantage of this situation, and he proposes to her himself, and puts her in this place of choice. You choose him or you choose me. And the girl's caught between a rock and a hard place. So on one hand, you have the abusive shop owner, who, it should be noted, had killed his three previous wives, or this pawnbroker, who had humiliated her previously. And she chooses pawnbroker. And then here's where the story becomes this whirlwind of psychological abuse. Pawnbroker fundamentally wants her to see just how noble and good of a man he is, despite the fact that he's a coward and a pawnbroker. He wants her to love him for who he is, and so his plan of making her love him is to ignore her, belittle her, humiliate her, constantly ignore her, so that in some weird, sick way, she's going to see past his cold facade and peer down onto his warm, noble, honest soul. In other words, if she's going to love him, she's going to have to work for it. And he's going to make her work hard for it. And he thinks he's winning. In fact, he's abusing her in the most terrible way. When she finally resigns to his coldness and retreats inside herself and begins to find happiness beyond his coldness, pawnbroker becomes terrified that he's lost her now, and so he does this character 180 and begins ardently pouring love and affection on her. And of course she's shocked, because where is this coming from? What is this about face? Why had he spent all those months previous, since courtship and now into marriage, pushing her away, and now he acts as if he wants her to love? So this freezing cold to flaming hot psychological abuse, this flip-flop, was so intense that it drove her to throw herself out a window to her death. She killed herself. So I just really oversimplified the story for a good reason. There's a lot of key plot points that I ignored, because the point I want to make is that this story is about an incredibly insecure man, a coward, a nobody who lived with the pain of knowing that he was a nobody. He was a nobody because he was a societal bottom feeder. He was a nobody because he was a coward. And he hated himself so much that his only avenue, his only channel of finding any kind of self-worth was to act as if he wasn't a coward, or to act as if he wasn't a liar or a cheat. And when he finally married a girl, it was for the sole purpose of belittling, humiliating, ignoring, and psychologically abusing her just to reinforce his own ego. So, two parting thoughts. First thing is that self-hatred and insecurity that leads to mental abuse is a very common human problem. It's something that all of us have done or even do at times to some extent. We have all belittled people just to make ourselves feel better and to forget our own insecurities. Second, at one climactic point in the story, Pawnbroker wakes up to realize that this girl is pointing a pistol at his head. For good reason, she hates him. He feigns sleep, and she chooses to lay the pistol down. But I would posit that a murder charge and the guilt of having killed the person abusing her would have been less mentally distressing than this pawnbroker's coldness and the inevitable suicide.